How do you see the debate people are having regarding your theory that the West has been cornering Russia, which led to the latter's invasion or war against Ukraine?
Well, I think that in the West, especially in Europe and the United States, the mainstream media rejects my argument almost completely. And instead of blaming NATO and the West for precipitating this crisis, they prefer, for obvious reasons, to blame Vladimir Putin. I would note to you, by the way, if you look at the Western Hemisphere, the United States has a Monroe Doctrine. The United States does not believe that countries in the Western Hemisphere have a right to have their own foreign policy. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, when I was young, we did not believe that Cuba had the right to invite the Soviets to put missiles in Cuba. The same basic principle that the United States applies in the Western Hemisphere is the one that the Russians are applying vis-a-vis Ukraine. The Russians view Ukraine becoming a part of NATO as an existential threat. This is why, going back to April 2008, Putin drew a line in the sand. He said, this is not going to happen. This is a threat to our survival. And everything that has happened since then fits that basic paradigm.
Now, here's the thing. You keep on saying existential threat, but now the question is, who would be able to come into the brain of President Putin to understand exactly what's the definition of existential threat?
He thinks that the idea of NATO on Russia's doorstep in Ukraine presents a military and political threat that is simply unacceptable. So I think in this case, there's not much question what he means when he says it's an existential threat. Now, I will point out to you that there are a good number of people in the West who say that it's not an existential threat, that NATO's presence in Ukraine does not threaten Russia's survival. My response to them is, I don't care what they think. The only thing that matters is what Vladimir Putin thinks. And if Putin and his lieutenants think it's an existential threat, we ought to be very careful in dealing with him because he has many thousands of nuclear weapons.
One of the reasons for your argument you cited earlier is that Russia is not looking at taking over Kiev. And yet people have been looking at the military actions that Russia took over there in that city and beyond. So how do you see the reality versus your theory? Many questions.
Well, I think if you actually look at the Russian military operation, it fits very neatly with my theory. Because the conventional wisdom, the argument that the US government and the US media makes, is that Putin was interested in conquering all of Ukraine and making it part of Russia. It is clear, as you say, that he tried to capture Kiev and he failed. But even if he had succeeded, if you couple capturing Kiev with the other gains that the Russians made on the ground, it does not even come close to conquering all of Ukraine.
Tell me more about how do you think this situation could come to an end? What is the best scenario and the worst scenario?
I can only say that I don't see how this comes to an end. And this is the reason. Russia cannot afford to lose. The United States, on the other hand, has decided that it is going to, number one, defeat Russia inside of Ukraine. And furthermore, we're going to strangle Russia's economy. So here we have a situation where Russia has to win and the United States has to win. You know both sides can't win. So what's the solution? I don't know.
So peace is not in sight at all.
Peace is not in sight at all. And I would note to you that there are are a number of people in the United States across the political spectrum who believe that this war is going to go on for years. Now, I hope that's not true. I hope there's something that's going to happen that's going to change all this that we cannot foresee. But absent that, I cannot tell you a happy story about how this ends.